Certainly in the major label world, you definitely need a manager because it's a complicated world, and people don't really want to they don't really want to deal with the artist. You know, I mean, the artist, people will look funny at you if you don't really have a manager. They'll be thinking they'll try and help you get a manager, you know, because they don't want you to not have a manager. In the independent world, you might not be able to really pay a manager. There wouldn't be enough money there, you know, at some point. I mean, the way that I look at developing a business is that you should do everything yourself until you just can't anymore, and then hire someone to do a piece of what you do. And if, like Derek Sivers over at CD Baby, I was talking to him once about how he built CD Baby, and that was exactly how he did it. He did everything himself until he just couldn't do it anymore, and then he hired someone to take a piece of that, and then, you know, when they were too busy, they hired another person, and, you know, but at the same time, making sure that the money was always there and that they were, you know, that there was a business plan. And he had told me, I think it was, you know, he was profitable since like the first or second month, you know, and he's you know, not ripping anybody off. He's a fair, you know, fair businessman. He writes checks to the people he does business with, and you know, but that I think it's a great example of how you build something. So, you know, if I were a musician and I wanted to be a professional musician, I would be thinking myself, like, I have to do all of this, and you can't just go, well, you know, I'm going to set up and play, and I'll get some manager to deal with it. Because the problem is that, you know, typically someone's first manager is usually a friend of theirs, you know, that's sort of around their circle, or maybe a fan, you know, or something like that. And ultimately, as nice as those people are, and, you know, some of them can develop into really good managers, but there's got to be money there. You know, there's got to be a plan. You know, there's got to be they have to make money too, you know, and so if the artist is making nothing, the manager's not going to be happy making 20% of nothing.
What do you think about a mother who's the manager?
Well, Gypsy was a good musical, but I don't know. I mean, I don't want to say that, you know, they can't make good managers. It seems to me, you know, that sometimes there's problems, you know, and that it's just because you love someone doesn't mean you can manage their career, you know, and it's not wrong, you know. I think that I can't think of any good examples where a mother was a great manager. I'm not saying there aren't any, I just can't think of any. But for instance, wives sometimes do actually make really great managers. I can think of a couple that are actually, you know, really solid. And do, you know, they do the best job there is, I think. You know, I mean, like for instance, John Scofield's wife, Susan, you know, been managing him for years. Great, you know, worked with them. Strangely enough, we represent them now, but I knew them actually too when I worked at Blue Note. And I was on the other side of the table. I was a business affairs person when John was signed at Blue Note. And, you know, she's fantastic. She's really on top of things. She, you know, she's always watching out for him, making sure that no one takes advantage of him and things like that. So I think that sometimes that can work. I think you need, you know, whoever your manager is going to be, you know, they have to know an awful lot about the business, and they have to be very astute and, you know, detail-oriented. There's a few different styles of management. That I think the one type of manager is, and I think the different types of managers can all work out okay. You know, I mean, it can all be fine no matter what kind you have. But I mean, you know, one kind is a showman. You know, classic example would be like Malcolm McLaren, who has this way of creating something out of nothing and creating a lot of activity and creating a vibe and a buzz about someone when there really isn't anything going on. You know. And that's, you know, boy, that's great, you know, and sort of a P.T. Barnum approach, and you know, they can be, you know, that can really work. I mean, look at the Sex Pistols, you know, they shot up out of nowhere through his efforts. Another type is someone that's more sort of methodical, very business-oriented. For instance, sometimes lawyers become managers. And you know, they're very good at keeping track of things and watching out, you know, for the band and making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed and things like that. But I think they all sort of have to have a level of marketing expertise, because really that's what an artist really needs. An artist really needs, I think, in a manager, someone who's going to pull it together and make it work, and create sort of the show of it all. I mean, it doesn't have to be a Malcolm McLaren to that extreme, but I think it's got to be someone who's going to think of stuff. Who's going to say, well, why don't we do this show and we'll advertise it that way, and help build the career, because you can't play defense 100% of the time. You got to play defense, but it's the music business isn't a defensive game. It's an offensive game, and you have to move forward and get bigger. And every year you should be able to, and if everything's going right, look back and say, I'm bigger than I was last year.